And one would be a fool to ever think all the lies they told could outshine the real receipts. They could never debunk and take credit for, like they contributed to my work as they did trying to compete where they definitely can't compare.
Let's look back in this video at some of these characters, starting with Snitch 9 Larry McGee and how he used others for his own benefits. I said what I said and watched many do the most to ignore the warnings. Let's unpack this.
Now I want you all to pay very close attention to this audio you're about to hear. Because when I came out here and I told my audience, while there was no need for me to debate with Team Lies or engage with all of these people who wanted to infiltrate a so-called inner circle, this clip is going to make it very clear why I didn't believe the stories that these parents, the Clarys, and the Savages came public and told, especially when people wanted to ignore why they needed Angelo Clary's daughter to go from a supporter to flipping on R. Kelly after being exposed to so much. And for those people asking about why the parents weren't charged like some of the super fans, well, think of it like this. What are the statute of limitations for so-called trafficking compared to manufacturing a janky-ass RICO? Just let it sink in. Especially when to this day, you can't show me not one minor in current day time that was so-called trafficked by Robert Kelly.
I'm saying he just ain't trying to hit shit. This is before ain't nobody reached out to him or none of that shit. And then the daddy is sitting there confirming this shit for me, telling me that he done went out of town and he done tried to confront the nigga at hotels. He'd have been all over the country and he ran out of money and his family wouldn't help him. And, you know, this is what he's dressing. Like, I was out of town knocking on doors and at the concerts confronting this nigga. And he says in an interview, because even if he comes out, he says in an interview that he was being detained. Okay, this is what he said, he was being detained. Like, I was being detained. Okay, so when a nigga sitting in front of you and his daughter the same age as your daughter, and your daughter is walking around in the house, just got all work and shit, and his daughter is missing, and he's telling you he being detained and all of that, I didn't really never put the spotlight on his black ass. You know what I'm saying? I never did that. And I told him after a couple of days of listening to this shit, and when the documentary was, I was like, look, man, you can't let this shit die because this nigga ain't buzzing, your daughter ain't calling, and then she goes on Gail King. No, say what happened first. After the couple of days that he was coming over my house, I put him in contact with Jay Morrison, a really good friend of mine at the time. Jay Morrison, he flies Alice to Atlanta to go sit down with my partner, and they do a recording like 4 or 5 hours. You know, it's still on the internet. And if you go back and you watch that video, you'll find all the lies in that video. But I didn't watch that video all the way through when he first did it. The shit was long.
Now it should start to sink in how I was able to line up my work after I collected all these pieces so that I could review to the people who really want to know, and watch how people who claim to have all the information try to piggyback off of my work. News from your local zoo. I'm here with an urgent reminder that could save both you and our beloved content creators who don't want to be doxxed by the zoo animals from serious harm. When visiting the zoo, you absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, feed the zoo animals. These janky creatures have erratic behavior patterns created by never-ending tales and lies, and enabling them can make them deliberately bold in ganging up to attack people or even be fatal. Instead, we watch them, observe their movements, and enjoy the manufactured shows that showcase their natural behaviors safely. It's about allowing these janky animals to believe people are not aware of their antics and keeping everyone protected. Reporting live, it's your girl Prima Donna at Prima Donna News. Please stand by for this clip of the zoo shenanigans. Now, clearly what has trickled down now is people acting oblivious to what witness tampering is. People acting oblivious to when R. Kelly's trial was going on, he raised some concerns that were brushed under the rug and then came right back out and resurfaced in the form of a lawsuit that obviously was not dismissed due to R. Kelly, but other things going on behind the scenes, which I choose not to comment on. But the fact of the matter is, I gave so many demonstrations as to why, even if people wanted to inform themselves by looking at all of these different characters that you're going to see put on public display, I'm going to remind you, who am I to have ever said anything about who people like and or who people want to listen to on YouTube? The fact of the matter is, I clearly said, if information didn't show up in paperwork and or I couldn't narrow down the storylines that were being embellished, that I couldn't pick up how these people were being deceptive, I wouldn't have too much to say, now would I? But you'd also be foolish to think I'm going to come out here and give you all of my thoughts when I've clearly demonstrated that on the same hand, there's people deliberately putting out misinformation for their own motivation, which again is not my concern or my business to investigate. Now, is it? So let's think back. When I clearly demonstrated that when old Snitch 9 came out talking about he was dealing with Don Russell in his kitchen with Pimp Low, if you think I'm finna be answering questions to some dummies whose primary focus is to raise questions trying to cap for Don Russell, you'd be foolish considering the primary point was that when they come out here and say they were dealing with the inner circle, they did this, they did that with that person, does that mean they were dealing with R. Kelly? And when I say 6 degrees of separation and they allow people to come out and keep giving R. Kelly the credit for certain actions, who's the fucking fool? Now, with that being said, let's roll this next clip because, again, even the cousin was going back and forth with old Pimp Low and Snitch 9, but people wanted to disregard why I could sit here and watch people like Dana J, who could bring out people like Angelo, who could share their version of events, and I could use my own discernment to put the pieces that I've collected in alignment with what's being said compared to the storylines that were being perpetualized in the form of indictments while people keep acting oblivious to, well, the prosecutors presented this and the defense didn't present that. Does that change any of the information to this day that people can go back, look at, and validate for themselves, especially when I'm telling you firsthand, if you don't have the information, if you can't pick out the pieces that I put out here and go research from there, it might have been entertaining watching people try to put words in my mouth, attach what this person said to what I've said, disregard certain information that I've put out there, disregard certain things that show the world reasonable doubt, and gravitate towards the stupid monkey ass shit that makes people not even want to take party in speaking out against the corruption that their goofy ass could never focus on all these years. But hey, maybe the smarty pants, they could come and figure out ways to get some of these immunities challenged, get some of these 501k letters challenged, etc. Instead of talking in circles, talking about, well, they could legally do this, they could legally do that, when at the end of the motherfucking day, just like you can't cherry pick some of my information and spin it as your own, you're not going to be able to pick and choose what parts of the information, what parts from the transcripts you're going to believe and not recognize what I've said for years is the credibility of these bad act witnesses and people stirring the pot that I could never get jiggy with like this.
Azrael knows where everything is. When I say the tape, she knows who's who. She knows where the bank accounts are, where the money is. She knows who's using who. Not seen what we've been trying to show you, that you've been brainwashed. But once she watched that documentary and she read the emails that I sent over to her.
The man dealt with R. Kelly in my living room, bro. The man dealt with R. Kelly in my kitchen. We dealt with Don Russell in my kitchen, bro.
People refuse to accept that we were watching all these individuals come out and help paint these narratives to help prosecutors seal their cases. But again, if they had all this evidence, ask yourself why.
We did our job. We brought the information to the public. Surviving R. Kelly went off, we kept that shit going. We got bus drivers, we got the storage. We got motherfucking video, audio. You ever seen Asriel at my house? You ever seen parents at my house?
We're actually hearing from the man known as his manager, also the muscle, Don.
Shit. My trial is over with. His trial is pretty much over with. I'm gonna put it all out there. And all these other motherfucking names that's attached to him know where the bodies are buried. They were there.
What did you uncover that made you say he has a problem? I'm done.
It was bullshit until, like I said, later on when I started thinking about it.
Now just imagine how crazy people appear to me when, for some strange reason, they never see when I say this or when I say that. But when I say something that they don't like, they always catch it. They always can come in and ask stupid ass questions. Like, for example, how I strategically put out the screenshots at first. I started to combine them because obviously the pieces were being moved. And even as now you look back and see things from a hindsight perspective, you can see how I aligned the information that would begin to surface if people started to get the crackers out their eyes and start paying attention to how this case was being prosecuted. Nothing wrong with listening to everybody give their points of view, but you a goddamn fool to ignore the red flags that people give you, then want to come out here talking about Black Lives Matter. Nobody cares about the black woman. People engage in all of this dysfunction for years, and people want to protect offending parties, acting like one crime is not as big or not as bad as the next, when last time I checked, no sin is greater than the next. So for these people who came following Larry Snitch 9 McGee on their high horses, pushing out all of this bullshit, stirring the pot, making people assume that just because I listened to certain things, that it was necessary to include a lot of hurt feelings along my research, that is the difference between me and some.
When she had Dawn Russell lying ass on there, I didn't get on it. I didn't speak on her. Tasha K and them just dragged her ass. If I was to send this email over there with all this shit in there for her family, I'm talking about, this is pictures I guarantee you wasn't even on the internet.
I find it very comical watching people play in your face, especially when years ago I told you people who are part of the problem in this R. Kelly situation also want to be a so-called helping factor. But the gag is, like I said then, a lot of the things these people put on these platforms are the very things that gave me insight into the fact Robert Kelly is not a Rico, and all the shit these people did to violate his rights, isolate his communications, then keep running to the internet trying to put all of these weirdos in his inner circle is why I can't take a lot of people serious at this point.
Article state that the other person was in trouble. It did not. It did not. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. You think we don't know? And I'm not saying that they can't pull no shit, but what I'm saying is I'm talking about the article at hand. There was a reason why the article didn't say what it said, and for people to make all these assumptions, and oh boy, to be a lawyer, you should know. If the feds got something, they ain't gonna announce it. They already got it. And if they gonna do something with it, they gonna do something with it. Ain't gonna be no reporter letting people know ahead of time what's going on. When you hear Fed investigation, everybody know that. Guess what? You hear after they've made arrests, okay? You hear after that.
A video of me, he made me do this video actually of me doing a number 2 in a cup and then eating it out of the cup.
So this is for whoever thought they was doing something by posting my story on the shade room and screenshotting it. Okay, first of all, I've always had a fucking phone, so I don't get where people think, oh my gosh, he has a phone. Wow. No, I've always had a phone. Just because my parents put it out there that I don't have a phone, that's them. I don't talk to my parents. I'm not in communication with my parents, and I don't want to talk to my parents. I'm a grown-ass woman, 21, about to be 22. And if I don't want to talk to my parents, I don't have to talk to my parents. I don't have to talk to nobody in this fucking world if I don't want to.
A trial that took about 5 weeks, and you're talking about 45 witnesses that the prosecution put forth, as well as 5 witnesses that the defense put forth. In addition to that, hundreds of pieces of exhibits that have been put forth in front of the jury. I mean, for the jury at this time, it's just so much evidence in terms of testimony to parse through and to determine the credibility, the believability of these victims that came forward. It's going to be very difficult for the jury to go through that, especially when you're talking about one RICO charge that consists of 14 different acts, as well as 8 Mann acts that are on the indictment as well.
You mentioned the RICO Act. So just how difficult is it for prosecutors to prove the federal crime of racketeering? And how do they go about getting it so that you can prove that kind of a case?
So the federal crime of racketeering is very difficult usually to prove, because normally the crime of racketeering is used when you're talking about mafia cases, when you're talking about gang cases, but you have never really ever seen it used against an R&B legend, a celebrity that he engaged in his singing career. The purposes of his tours were to go and gather women in order to engage in sexual criminal acts with them. You don't see that happening. It's difficult for the prosecution in that sense, and also that they have to prove that, look, there was an enterprise, that the people that worked underneath R. Kelly were working with him knowing and intelligently in order to procure these women to engage in sexual acts with R. Kelly, and that this was a pattern throughout the years with R. Kelly. However, the prosecution, during a 6-hour closing argument, was able to say, like, look, his bodyguards, his managers, his drivers, his personal assistants, that they all enabled R. Kelly in the sense of keeping them quiet, arranging their travel, arranging that someone is with them at all times. So things like that are what the jury's going to have to consider, but it's very difficult in this sense because we're not dealing with the typical RICO of a mafia or gang case.
To me was the consistent behavior of people inside Robert's camp that were bringing underage girls around with fake IDs and then getting a payment settlement. And I have documentation, as you saw in the videos, of all this inside corruption. There was an enterprise going on, but it was to the exclusion of Robert because they were capitalizing on his lack of education, on his maniacal work ethic, on the fact that he, I don't want to say he's illiterate because I don't like that negative connotation, but he does have compromised reading and learning skills. He has said that. So that it's easy for someone to take advantage of you.
They come up with something negative about him, and that's every one of them. This is bigger than R. Kelly, so if they can break Bill Cosby, they can break R. Kelly, Michael Jackson, he in his grave and they still trying to break him.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this case? It's a 12.
They're using a lot of money, a lot of resources trying to keep Mr. Kelly behind bars.
Guilty. I don't think he would have been found guilty. That's just how I see it. They found him guilty. I mean, there's nothing I can say. It was proven in the court of law, and I hate to say that, but it was proven in the court of law. So, I mean, if that don't go through, he has to just accept the reality. Like, boom, this is what it is. I mean, that's, even as supporters, we have to accept it. Like.
Yo, he janky or fake, a snake in the grass for goodness sake. He make up the story, getting paid for the glory of the view he made. Pushing the press past, stirring up the mess fast. Yeah. Time is ticking, you better stand by. Time is ticking, you better stand by. Before you get burned, don't even cry. Time is ticking, you better stand by. Yeah. He be scheming and dreaming, living for the views, he be fiending. Believe him, he'll make up the news. Time is ticking, you better stand by. Time is ticking, you better stand by. Before you get burned, don't even cry. Time is ticking, you better stand by. YouTube weirdos paying the bills. Snake oil salesman giving them chills. Beef for the views it never fulfills. Running from the truth cause he lacks the skills. Yeah. 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 Yeah.